Okay, finishing up this module on Congress. If you can go to slide number 73. Something that we need to understand is that for the last 60, 70 or so years, a lot of the lawmaking that Congress does is delegated to administrative agencies, okay? And we'll talk about this in the chapter on administrative agencies, but something you just need to realize is through some Supreme Court decisions, it has been basically decided since the 1940s that Congress may delegate lawmaking to an administrative agency. Just like take the example of the Obamacare, okay, in 2009, 2010. When Congress wrote Obamacare, they wrote it in kind of a broad, kind of bullet point, general idea format. And then they handed it over to the Department of Health and Human Services, and they wrote the rest of it. Okay, why could that be problematic? Well, because it says in Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, all legislative power is herein granted to a Congress of the United States. It does not say that an administrative agency under the executive branch, okay, again, think of it, the president appoints the director of Health and Human Services. In this case, it was Kathleen Sebelius. Okay, he appointed that individual to be in charge. So in other words, you've got the executive branch doing legislative branch work. Okay, is that a violation of the separation of powers? Okay, you can see where that could run into, some problems there. Okay, and so what tends to happen is Congress, who they may not be experts in healthcare, they may not be doctors. Okay, they may not understand all of the, minutia of healthcare and healthcare law and all that good stuff. But perhaps the Department of Health and Human Services does. And so they write all of the specifics and they fill out the rest of the law, and then it goes into effect. Okay. So in other words, Congress is passing, the estimates I've heard of up to 80+% of laws by Congress are created this way. Okay. They're punted to the Environmental Protection Agency, or different other agencies like that. Okay, so if you haven't heard me say this before, you can see this on the slide. This is actual the video, okay, of Nancy Pelosi, who, as Speaker of the House in 2010, was asked what's in Obamacare because it hadn't been passed yet. And she said this, and you can see the quote on the screen. "We have to pass this bill so you can see what's in it." Okay, now people's mouths dropped. Like, are you totally clueless, lady? What's going on here? Okay, because people are like, why would you say that? What she was doing is she was revealing, whether she realized it or not, this very thing I'm talking about, is that this idea that Congress doesn't even know what a bill will ultimately become until they pass it, and then it's punted over to these executive agencies who write the rest of it. So that's why she said, listen, we're just gonna have to pass it, and then we'll really see what's in it. Okay, why could that be problematic? Well, because, you're supposed to represent the people, and these laws are supposed to reflect the will of the people. And if the people don't even know what's actually going to be in the law, because the Congress doesn't know what's going to be in the law, and they don't know what's going to be in the law until after they pass it, how is that representative government? How is that Republican small r government? Okay, you can see the slide there in slide number 64. Okay, this is from Federalist 62 by James Madison. Okay, he was hinting at this. Okay, because again, I use Obamacare as an example because it's one of the biggest bills passed by Congress in my lifetime for sure. And it was very, very complex. I mean, was it 4,000 pages? Okay. In other words, it takes lawyers trained in administrative law to actually read it and understand it. Okay. Why could that be a problem? Well, that could be a problem because if your average congressman perhaps doesn't even know what's in it and doesn't know how to understand it, how can that represent the will of the people? Okay. Again, you've got unelected bureaucrats making law and writing law in a very specific way, and your average congressman doesn't even know what's in it or can perhaps not understand it because they're not a trained chemist or they're not a doctor. Okay, there's nothing wrong with doctors and chemists working in the process, but not to actually write law that's supposed to reflect the will of the people, and unelected bureaucrats who are not accountable to the people are writing it. So if it's bad law, it's really hard to deal with them or to address them. Okay, so this is what James Madison talked about when he talked about what does a bad law look like. Okay, so he said this in Federalist 62. The internal effects of a mutable, that means changeable, policy are still more calamitous. In other words, it's not good. It poisons the blessings of liberty itself. It will be of a little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice, if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood, if they be repealed or revised before they are promulgated, or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it'll be tomorrow. Okay, he's talking about laws that change all the time. How can people know what it is? Okay, let me give you an example. I know it's anecdotal, but it's my story, so I can tell it. So this is, Obamacare had passed, and so this is, I don't know, a couple, 2-3 years in. This is like 2012, 2013, okay? Working for a small organization, only had a few employees in it, didn't think we had to go through Obamacare, bought my own insurance through a private sector, didn't think it applied to me, okay? So I get a call from the best way to say it, the business manager for this organization that employed thousands of people. Said, hey, Eric, here's the deal. Just found out after looking through Obamacare, okay, this is at 2 years after it's passed, okay, 2-3 years after it's passed. We looked through it and we figured something out. We realized that this was late May of like 2013. We realized if you don't go over to Obamacare until after July of that year, you will be fined $100 a day for noncompliance. Okay, in other words, this law was so complex, it was so voluminous, it had changed so many times that by the time it got down to little old me, okay, I didn't understand it, and the guy that was over me, that was supposedly the expert in looking at business law, it took him a good year and a half or so to find out that it was gonna affect me. Okay, that's what Madison's talking about. He said it's not good law when it changes, when it's so voluminous, in other words, it's so big, okay? If it's repealed or revised, in other words, if it changes, okay, it's not good law. And again, why am I saying this? I'm not just picking on Obamacare, although Obamacare is an easy target. But a lot of laws are this way, okay? In other words, if it affects the average person, if the average person doesn't understand it, well, who is going to profit from this? Okay, this is what Madison goes on to say. Okay, so he says, law is defined to be a rule of action, but how can there be a rule which is little known and less fixed? Another effect of public instability is the unreasonable advantage it gives to the sagacious, the enterprising, and the moneyed few over industrious and uninformed masses of the people. Okay, who's the sagacious, enterprising, and moneyed few? That's another way of saying lawyers, right? People that are experts in administrative law. They're going to benefit from this. They're going to make all kinds of money off of this kind of stuff, okay? But the industrious, the uninformed masses of the people, well, like me, I didn't know that. And had this guy not told me that, I could have been fined, $3,000 a month for noncompliance just because I did not buy health insurance through Obamacare and I chose to buy it through the private sector, okay? Just trying to show you, again, where we're at as a country as laws are being made today. Many of them are being made in their entirety, or at least to a great degree of them, not by the congressmen we voted for, but unelected bureaucrats. Okay, we just got to be aware of that. So with that, I'll end my lesson on Congress, and I'll talk about the Supreme Court case called Yakis in 1944 that dealt with how the Supreme Court said that it is constitutional for Congress to punt its legislative powers over into the executive branch through administrative agencies. Very, very interesting. Okay, I'll end there. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.